Thanks for tuning in to the Big Nose Podcast, a platform for me to nose into other people's business. On this podcast, I strive to share with you stories from a range of different people over various different topics. So, before my nose starts twitching any further, let's get down to business. Hello and welcome to the Big Nose Podcast. The latest edition on the podcast today is my cousin, Derek Cromwell. Derek is currently working down in University Hospital Limerick, and he has joined me today to talk about why he got into nursing, what he's done to date, and the impact of COVID over the last 10-11 months. Nice to have you with me, Derek.
Hi, Pierce. Happy New Year to you.
And you. I suppose it's a new year, but it's kind of the same old story at the moment. But we'll get into that. I suppose, Derek, for the listeners and everybody kind of tuned into this, you'd probably be able to get a good insight into who you are, where you're from, and what got you to where you are today. I suppose you're growing up, obviously you're a dub, even though you're down in Limerick.
Educating them down here, Pierce. I'm educating them down here.
No better, man. So what was it like growing up for you? How did kind of nursing come across to you as something that you were interested in?
Yeah, it's actually a good question because obviously I grew up in Coolock during the 80s, so exactly working class, quite rough, a lot of unemployment as you can imagine. So nursing wasn't something obviously I thought of then. Them days was like get through school and then just work if you can, or those other activities which obviously my parents wouldn't want me going through, and through good parenting I avoided all that, thankfully. But as time went on into college, went to Belcamp College, which was one of the local colleges there, and I went there because I suppose all my friends were going there. We all grew up. The estate Belcamp was built in 1980, and that's when we all moved in, so a lot of us have grown up from a very young age together. We all moved into new estates, and then so they were all going to Belcamp, so I went there. Quite a good school. It was all boys, no girls to distract us, so plenty of work to be done. But it was run by a religious order called the Oblate Brothers. So one of the priests there, they used to have a school liaison who was always in one of the actual Oblate Brothers, and he would sort of liaise and do things with all the different classes. And he used to, Peter Klukas, he actually became a very good friend of mine over time, and he actually used to run a youth pilgrimage to Lourdes down in south of France for 10 days with the Inchicore parish, because that's where his Oblate's main Oblate base is in Dublin, is Inchicore. So he used to get the young people from school, a sort of sixth class leaving, to see could they get them to come. And actually there's a group from England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. There's about 20 to 30 young people who used to drive over on bus, meet the elderly over there. Their pilgrimage would be 5 days. We'd help with wash them in the morning, getting them dressed, wheel them to and from all the masses and all the religious icons and what you do over there. So sort of me and my friends, we were in sixth class, he spoke to us about it, and sort of it was a holiday in our eyes, and we'd done some work with him over in Inchicore, doing raffles and things like that, and met other people. So it was a group going over, and I met some friends who are actually still friends 25 years later with me through that. So I was doing that for 5 or 6 years, and I did my leaving. I was quite young. I was 16 doing my leaving. Wow. Even though my parents were trying to keep me for an extra year. So I sort of worked from 16 and up to around 21. I've been going to Lourdes every year, and basically you were going to help the elderly, but also it was also a holiday, and plus you're meeting old friends who you built up in that, and that was the main sort of interest in it, to be honest with you. But like I used to enjoy going over. I used to enjoy with the elderly, talking to them, taking them up for coffees down in Lourdes town, and just enjoying time with them and everyone else in the group. But then I suppose I was working as a chef first, my first job actually. My neighbour got me a chef job when I was 16, so I worked as a commie chef. Tough job as well. Very tough job. Yeah, especially when the head chef was always shouting at you.
Yeah, the old school ways haven't left, I don't think.
Yeah. So I did that, and then after that I went to Australia to our aunt over there and my cousins. So I stayed there for 3 months, and I absolutely loved it. And so after speaking to them, I decided I was going to emigrate over to Australia. So when I come home, I left the chef to go to Australia. When I come back, went looking for a job again. I ended up working in a news agent on Leeson Street. So I was working there for about 3 years, just building up money and getting the application ready to go to Australia. Back in them days, it was through sponsorship, you paid, and a number of different factors that got you there. So I saved up the money, which is a lot. It was 500, which is a lot back in the early 90s. So, and I had no car in them days. I was working at 12 o'clock basically, my friend Peter, who's the priest who used to organise the Lourdes trip, he said he'd drop me out and then drop me to work.
Yeah.
So I went up there. In fairness to the lady at the office, I showed her all the paperwork, showed her the money, and she basically told me you won't get a visa. She said, you're very close to it, but you'll get it. It was a pool. So if you got over 100 points, 110, you went into a pool, and 110 above, you got an automatic. She said, you won't get it because you're a job.
Yeah.
She said, the job's not good enough because obviously a profession.
Yeah.
So that was a bit low. So before I went to work, Peter took for a coffee, and you're sitting there, and obviously you're looking at your options, and we're talking. He said, "Oh, about electrician." I said, "No, I tried that, didn't like it." He said, "Plumber." I said, "No, not for me." And he said it out of the blue. You just look. I said, "I've seen you in Lourdes." He says, "I actually think you'd make a good nurse." And my reaction was to actually laugh, to be honest with you. I was like, "What? A nurse? Not something you think of when you're growing up in Coolock."
No, it's not. It's not something either for, I suppose, a male back then either. It would have been something that would have been traditionally a woman's role.
Definitely male. Growing up in inner city Coolock and Dublin, where rough and drugs and crime is rife. That's more the route you'd think people would go down. So actually he said, and he sort of, no, and he said, sort of thing that at that stage of my life, there's been a lot going in. My dad was sick from a young age, and I suppose he sort of mentioned a nugget that, look, you can also do it in England.
Yeah.
So that's sort of thought. I had friends over in England from the Lourdes pilgrimage, so they were good friends of mine. That sort of tweaked my interest. And I said, all right, maybe. So I went back to my other good friend in the shop, who was the manager. I spoke to him. As soon as I said to him, he said, yeah, you'd be great. And then all of a sudden, the more people I spoke to, everyone said the same thing. Don't know why. But
the realisation of the character that you were and the type of person you were that you probably didn't realise was in yourself.
No, I actually didn't, because when Father Peter said to me, I actually laughed. I did laugh at him. I said, I'm a nurse now. And then the more I spoke to people, they all said, yeah, you're actually very good. And in them days, it was points, as is now, very high to do it in Ireland. And at the time, I did my leaving cert in 93, so I wasn't looking around to college. It was just to get out of school and pass the leaving was the main thing. So obviously not the points. But in England, it was sort of, I think it was a B in 2 subjects, a C in other subjects, which had English and maths.
Yeah.
You had a number of colleges to do. So I sort of applied for England. And so I was looking back, old personal history, as you know yourself. My dad was very unwell when I was a young age, in the hospital for a long time with mental health issues, unfortunately. My mum then was raising me and my brother and sister, my 2 sisters and brother at the time.
Yeah.
So I was being the oldest. I took over the sort of father figure role in the family while my dad wasn't able to or sick. So I suppose that sort of protector sort of minder sort of side was there, caring side was there, as you said, without me realising it, because you're sort of trying to live your own life. It's only then people thought it. So that's a roundabout way. It's amazing how things happen sometimes. You don't expect it, and then obviously the blue left.
Yeah, something came to give you kind of an opportunity to do what you wanted to do. In terms of the training and what was involved in that, how did that come about, and what was involved in the level of training that you needed, and when you went and got your qualification?
Yeah, so in them days it's pretty much the same as now. I think it might be a bit different now. Was you needed a diploma in higher education, nursing, obviously. So like there's a number of colleges to go to, like NMS and the English board over there, organise your training. It's a matter of just getting there's a booklet. You apply offer to get a booklet that basically tells you all the colleges that do nurse training, all the hospitals are attached to, and what the qualifications were. Yeah. So once I got that, you usually choose 5 hospitals that you'd like to work in. So for me, London was a big one, because a lot of friends in London. Being a big Liverpool supporter, Liverpool was my second option, and then I had 1 or 2 others in London I would put down. So then you would wait for a reply, and then it was actually Middlesex University, part of the Royal Free Hospital, big hospital over in London, which has been on the news recently. They were the first ones to come back to me, and I suppose must have been September '97. They invited me over for an interview. So basically, you go over for an interview, they sit there, they go through your leaving results, and then you have a chat with you, and then they make a decision whether you're happy for it. So they accepted me fairly straight away.
Very good.
So that was sort of, so when I come back then, it was like that decision was made, and then Liverpool sort of contacted me and say, we're inviting you in February, when I was actually meant to start the London training. But they were sort of, you need to do an interview in a day, you do an essay in a day, you do an exam in a day, they'll have a sort of aptitude test, and they said then to decide. So I sort of looked at it and thought, well, look, a bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bushes. Must have loved to go to Liverpool. London, give me a place. I don't want to pass this up, and then obviously Liverpool I don't get, so I end up going to London.
So
working in your famous Cricklewood, living in Cricklewood.
Life in London, what's that like?
Brilliant. I'm gone there now 20 years, and I still miss it.
You serious?
I suppose Well, I went over a lot of Irish on the course. Like
Yeah.
in my intake, I went March '98 when I started. There was 250 in our year
Genie.
doing it. That's how big it was. Like about 180, 190 were Irish,
Serious.
about 30, 40 were African, and about 4 or 5 were English. That was sort of nominations of it. So it was a lot of Irish. So for me, going over from Dublin, so it was one big city to another big city now. Obviously, Dublin's on a different scale to
Yeah.
Dublin. But at least you had the idea of city life, had friends there. There's a lot of girls I went over and trained with and sort of lived with in halls of residence. Like they basically went from small country villages over to London. I was just like wild. It was
Absolutely.
wild the first year.
I can imagine a little bit of freedom, a little bit of hustle and bustle,
Definitely.
and you're never exposed to it. It's something that you could dip your toe in, and all of a sudden find yourself 6 foot into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, London, obviously an interesting city. Obviously you went and you got your qualifications, and obviously you do a bit of training and what have you.
Yeah.
But nothing, I don't think, prepares you for the first day on the job on your own, compared to what you're learning in books and having someone stand beside you watching what you're doing. What was the expectations going into nursing against what the reality of it what actually looked like?
Well, see, I was lucky in a sense that, like, at the time I qualified, I was just over 21, so I was a lot more older, mature, and like that. I'd been working for 5 years, so back home in Dublin before I did the nursing. So it was sort of not a massive shock to myself. To a lot of them, you would see it was very, very strange. When you start a job, I suppose it's difficult because it's a new job. All of a sudden, and what I found from nursing is, even today, still the same. I could be there on Friday night on the ward as a student nurse, and you're treated as a student nurse and your thing, and then that same person goes away for the weekend, because back on Monday they're a qualified nurse, and all of a sudden you're expected to know absolutely everything. No one sees that you're only qualified a week. Patients want to know the answers, reps want to know the answers, doctors come up to you. All of a sudden you're going from this student nurse, and I was in a student nurse uniform. A week later, you're a qualified nurse, you're in the uniform, and all of a sudden everyone expects you to know everything when you're on the ward. And that was sort of a big shock in it. Obviously your colleagues would work around when you get trained. It was hard from the public and patient perspective. Like you are scared. You think, well, I can't tell them I don't know that, or I haven't done that before.
Yeah.
Don't get them comments. But as experience comes, you realise you can. But at that time, when you're starting out first in the ward, you think, oh my God, what do I do here? I was lucky, as I said, I was a bit older than a lot of my peers who trained on it. So and I'd worked for 5 years and been through a lot with my family. So
a bit more life experience. Yeah, a little bit more life experience.
Life experience is massive. It's absolutely massive. People underestimate how much life experience helps you in the everyday life.
Because I think if it's a case, as you were saying, you had 5 years experience, you had dealt with the public, you know how to speak to them if you didn't know the answer. Whereas if you're a newbie, whatever age you are, young, your first job, and someone comes up to you and all of a sudden you're like a rabbit in headlights, and you don't know how to deal with the situation in the best way. But with the life experience, it does give you that. So you went from college, obviously, and qualifying. How did you get them back to... What was your next move then in terms of your career?
So my next move was basically, as part of the course, you did 30 in your last year. You did an 8-week placement in one hospital, where you're actually sort of part of the numbers. You get more responsibility within a final year of training. And then in Middlesex, for your last placement, which is about 2-3 months before you qualify, it's a month long, and you get to choose. You can put forward where you'd like to work.
Yeah.
So me and my friend, I worked on what's called a gastrointestinal ward, Cordwainer's ward at the time, basically just abdominal surgeries and the surgical ward. And I liked that work there. So I requested my placement back there. So I liked the nurse there, I liked the type of work that was there. So when I did that third placement, I applied for it. It's different. At that time, anyway, it's probably the same. In England, you actually apply directly to the ward. They have their own funding, and they do their own hiring and firing.
Yeah.
When I come home here, you apply to the hospital. You might apply for that certain job, but it's actually, the hospital could take me out and put me somewhere else, But over there, you apply directly to that ward, and the manager in that ward interviewed you. So that's why it started there. I suppose when you qualify, you're delighted to find you qualified.
Of course. Yeah.
And so real money coming in. It's sort of, you're 3 years down the line then. For me, I was 24, so I was obviously a bit older, maybe 20s. So you want to sort of just... And my idea of approach was, at that stage, I didn't know where I wanted to work. some people do, you know, well, I want to do this, I want to be an ICU, I want to be this sort of nurse, I want to be a specialist. For me, it wasn't. It was just, let's go, see how it is. We'll work here for a while and we'll see how life takes us. And it was just basically getting experience, consolidating my training, and just getting some experience actually being a nurse on a ward. It was a very good ward to work on. And actually, a little nugget of information there, I actually used to work with Kate Winslet's uncle.
Wow.
Yes, he's a professor, a surgical professor he was at the time. Mr. Winslow,
That's
uncle he was.
That's mad. It's you wouldn't know who you're going to come across. Like some of the times.
No, it's a strange world at times, isn't it?
And it's even stranger now that, you know, I see people when I'm working in Vincent's that I pass through the corridor every day, and then they're all of a sudden they're on the 6-1 News giving a chat to whoever's, you know, broadcasting on that evening. It's very strange, and it's very real, because you know them from the TV, but also you know them from standing beside you in the coffee queue or what have you. Obviously, you decided then, you know, you're now down in UL. How did you end up in UL, I suppose, or University Hospital? What is the story from going from London or graduating? Then obviously you're a little bit older now. Let's say a little bit older. Just a year or two. You're still learning, as every day is, I suppose. But you're now down there in the hospital. I suppose where are you working? What are you doing at the minute? And how did you get there?
Well, like that, I just said, the story behind it was I was sort of, in London, happy in London, but then obviously, like every young man, we meet a fine young lady, and they sort of change the way we look at things and see. So I sort of, at the time, fell in love with a girl who was a nurse as well, and a little nugget of information. She was actually my mentor when I was a student nurse on the place, and that's where I got to know her. It's okay, nothing happened at that time. It was a year later.
It was all studying, I suppose, and work related.
That's it, yeah. But no, she wanted. We got together. We were seeing each other for those 7 or 8 months, and before she met me, decided she wanted to move home. So then she sort of, at that time I was young. I thought, look, I like her. We're getting on great. I don't believe in long distance relationships. It was either end the relationship or we go back and see how we get on.
Yeah.
I thought, look, I don't want to be sitting here now interviewing you and say, look, I remember this girl. I should have gone home with her. So I decided to move home. I suppose when I went to London, I always thought at some stage, I didn't know when, at some stage I would end up moving back home.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that massive deal for myself to move back home. The question was, where do we go? Do we go Dublin? Do we go Cork, where she's from, North Cork, who's on the Limerick border, where she's from, or she had friends in Meath who she trained with. So we looked at all the options. But that stage then, it was 2002, the boom was on. It wasn't that cheap to buy houses.
No.
And even like I remember looking at a house that was in Belcamp. I knew the house around the corner. Like I remember we were growing up, one family bought the house off the corporation for 40,000 back in the early 90s. And we were like, exactly. We were all going, my God, they must be rich. How do they afford that? Now I'm looking at houses now, like the same houses now 10 years later were 280,000, 300,000, right?
Yeah.
And her father left her land, so she had a site at home to build on. So look, we looked at the price, and I said, you want to go home, let's move down here. So we moved down here, build. And there's 2 hospitals. There's Limerick University Hospital, or there's CUH Hospital. And where she lived in Cork, just outside Charleville, it's closer to Limerick. It's half an hour to Limerick, so that's the hospital.
Yeah.
We both went to work in.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up down in UL. And when I come back here, I suppose there was just sort of a lot going on. New job, new house, and we're building a house. I had to build a house there and get married. And
it was a busy life at that stage, building a house, you know, moving in together, coming home. It's all busy. Yeah,
it is indeed. And then like I work from a work point of view, I suppose what surprised me was I'd only worked 2 years over in London, and I'm on a gastrointestinal ward, which had a lot of it. You had a good bit of autonomy to make decisions, obviously within the scope of your practice and your sort of guidelines, things like that. But sorry, I had more responsibility, and treated like, I felt in London you're treated like a professional. When I come home here, I did find it a massive shock coming from London, obviously down to a small town, small village I wasn't used to. But even from a professional point of view, you came home, and them days it just seemed to be very much the doctor was godlike figure.
Yeah.
I was like I remember one time I went onto a medical ward. I was going to work in the critical care department, which was only small at the time, and the high dependency unit, but there wasn't a pole. They were moving to a bigger area, so I had 3 months to wait, so they put me in the medical ward. I remember being in the medical ward, and just like that, it was just a shock, because you couldn't, things we're doing over in London, they're like, no, the doctor has to do that, you can't do that here. And it's like, but why can't we? able to do it.
Yeah.
It was very much no, let's wait for the doctor to do this and do that. So it was a big adjustment when it came back. It's a bit of a shock, to be honest.
Yeah, and a bit restricting by the sounds of things, and undermining it could be thrown out there as well. Moving forward to today, what department are you working in at the moment?
I'm glad
all of them.
All of them, yeah. No, I work in the emergency department in University Hospital Limerick. I have done for the last 5 years.
And how are you finding that?
I'm in the ED. Sorry?
How are you finding that?
Tough, as you can imagine.
I can
working in the emergency department is tough on a normal day, as you can imagine. But especially in these times now, in the last year, it's been tough. It's been pressure.
And in terms of the department within the hospital, obviously they have a role to play within. Obviously, it's the hint is in the name, emergency department. But what is the role for the listeners out there in terms of what did the emergency department do, the responsibilities of when you present at the emergency department?
Yeah, so there's a number of different ways you can imagine. So sometimes it's your GP, you go to your GP feels you need to see a certain specialist or a certain pathway which they feel needs to come in. People self-present, as you can imagine, as well. Also as well, sometimes in the clinics, we have people out in the clinics because the doctors with the bed capacity being full consistently, especially down here in Limerick, we have a massive catchment area down here. We're covering sort of parts of Kerry, Clare, Tipperary and Limerick and sort of North Cork, parts of North Cork as well. So it's a massive catchment area in there. And so you're getting we've always, I say, anyone that follows it, the trolley counts and the INMO trolley count, we're always top of the trolley count. So there's a number of ways we present, and sometimes like that, it's either they self-present themselves after coming in, or it's via ambulance. So like at the moment we're under a lot of pressure, and triage is where the point where you meet the first nurse and they'll assess you and then move you on to the appropriate area or refer you on to the appropriate speciality. So that area at the moment is quite hectic and busy at the moment because we're getting a lot of sort of peaks where people are coming at one time, and like we have 2 triage nurses, but 3 nurses, 3 clerical staff checking in. And then all of a sudden your screen having 2 people to triage goes from 2 to 10 to 15 within 20 minutes.
Yeah, so it can escalate very quickly. And obviously it's, as you said, it's triage, and so depending on what's coming in through the door, depending on the matters that are involved, obviously categorized down then into level of severity. You can be treating one person 1 minute, and then obviously a heart attack might come in, and then all of a sudden that person has to go down in level of priority.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's, I suppose, depends on the type of personality you are as well, whether it suits you or not. You see some nursing, you just think, you look at them and you just go, they're ED nurses, they're a desperate job. There's other people like that, you think, I look at myself and think, look, actually that person's quite good nurse, but actually I think they'd be better in oncology because they want to give all the patient care. Where an ED sometimes uses not like that. It's prioritising, it's getting them stable, it's moving them on to the next area so you can look after the next one. Especially working in an area like resus. That's where we get our sickest patients, your cardiac arrests, these who are septic, who sort of need immediate care and treatment. So from that, you need to sort of stabilise them, either move them on to a specialist ward in critical care or move them on different parts of ED, but in a stable condition. And like that, the adrenaline rush sometimes can be very good in the things. It can be enjoyable because you are, and you feel like you're doing something as an ED nurse. I like it because you feel like you're involved in the care, you're helping. You can see straight away. It's difficult nursing in the medical ward, taking the same patient for weeks.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we see instantly, look, we've made a difference there. That's actually would always save someone's life and move up to ICU. So it is quite an interest, and you see absolutely, as you can imagine, you see absolutely everything and anything in ED.
I well believe there's some stories you could tell. Well, maybe not for this podcast, but I'm sure you've seen things walk in the door and you're like, just how does this happen? It does sound like obviously an intense, as you said, the level of adrenaline that flows through maybe you and the team is there, but obviously with the impact of COVID-19 since last March, this has put another layer on the role that you do in the department that you are. And taking back to March when you were starting out kind of dealing with this and the impact of having to wear the extra PPE, could you kind of give us a sense of what, realistically, to us it just looks like another gown or a pair of goggles, but the impact on you doing your job, just general physical impact on you of wearing all this extra PPE?
It's exhausting. It is. Really? It is exhausting, and like that, like when it first started in March, and we were sort of looking at the rest of Europe and how they were coping with it. We were doing training. I did training on nights for cardiac arrests when they come in, how we're going to do it, because it's changed from the normal procedure. If a cardiac comes in, you'd have a number of people in there, but we were like told we have to limit to 4 people in there. An anaesthetic doctor, your ED doctor, and 2 nurses, or a nurse and another doctor, depending. Someone outside then handing things into you, where everything's in the room normally to grab, and there the majority of things needed. So we were really trained and prepared for the worst, really, where we were told, like, if a patient collapses in the room, your normal instinct, run in, sort them out, check them out, see they're okay. But we've been told, no, you don't do that. Your first instinct is gown up. Because at that stage, not everywhere we're wearing full PPEs. It depends on what area you're in and what patient you're dealing with. Because obviously we weren't getting the true COVID patients in that stage. We're getting 1 or 2 in who weren't really COVID, but it was just people panicking,
of course,
worrying themselves. But like, I suppose, like that, we were sort of a different way of thinking. No, you don't go in there, gown up first, no matter how long it takes, make sure your PPE is run correctly, then enter the room. We're also being told things like, you might be in an incident where there's 2 people in a cardiac arrest being resuscitated, and someone's having to make a decision. There's only 1 ICU bed. Oh, that this patient's 70 and this patient's 80, or we're going to let the 80-year-old die, I'm going to send the 70-year-old up. So we were sort of being prepared for all that in our job. So you imagine the stress and the worries that was bringing. And then slowly it came on. And we were lucky down in Limerick. We didn't get the full brunt like the East Coast did, and the hospitals up in Dublin and did. So we were lucky in that sense. We're sort of seeing it now. Although there's a lot of sort of was foreboding. We didn't know what to expect. Like me personally, when it started, I'm now separated from my wife. But we have a good relationship. But she texts me saying, look, what about isolating away from the kids? So I'd spend 3 months away from my kids. I couldn't see them. Well, I did see them, was like sitting in the car looking out the window for 20 minutes every now and again, because the risks of spreading the COVID. Basically lived isolation for 3 months. Only seeing people from work was a mix of people, because just couldn't take the risk, and we didn't know much about the illness. So in that way, and then you're coming home exhausted from shifts. You said there's not much. You're in a hot environment as well. You're working in a stressful job, so you're sort of physically moving around as well, especially in cardiacs and things like that. So actually, it's just physically demanding as well, where the PPEs. People don't realise that. Plus, well, you've seen interviews, I'm sure, on the TV during it, where people are taking the mask and their face is all marked from where the mask was so tight on them, and they're wearing that for 12, 13 hours while holding on the job. It is difficult and it is exhausting.
And I think you touched on it there. It's we all see the PPE, but we don't see what happens in terms of, as you said, you're in a situation personally where you had to isolate yourself from your kids for the space of 3 months, and you're not the only person I know of that's in that situation, and it's a very selfless act in terms of you want to protect your family. Obviously, that's the first and foremost, but it has to wane on you. You're over the time. It's only so much you can deal with it, because obviously, as talking to you and knowing you, you're very much a family man. You enjoy the interaction with your kids. You enjoy the interaction with your wider family, and it's all of a sudden you're going from what you were doing pre-COVID now to a situation where you're pulling up in a car park and seeing your kids through a window. It's harrowing.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And even now the second wave is coming back. It's back isolating away from the kids. And this time, actually, it's worse this time now, in the sense that you have COVID fatigue in there now, because I just want this gone. And now actually we're in Limerick now. We're the highest numbers with the COVID patients in there at the moment. So we're getting the brunt of it now at the moment. So that's adding extra stress on, because like that, isolation beds are reduced. ED is busier. Your job in ED, in triage, for example, like a triage, someone with a limb injury, I can triage within a minute or two and have them off the right area. Where now you can't. I'm doing observation, I'm asking questions I wouldn't normally ask someone with a wrist injury, and then it's like, well, I'm going to send you up to a different area now, I've got to ring a porter, I've got to book into that. So your job now, our jobs in ED, is actually everything's taking longer.
Absolutely.
It's a knock-on effect.
Yeah, it has a knock-on effect. It also, you're there to do a job, and these precautions and these extra precautions that you put in, and the risk assessment that you do, limit the amount of people that you can actually see, and that obviously plays in your mind. You want to see as many people go through in a safe manner, but these precautions and limitations that we don't think of when we think of what's going on, we think of maybe the PPE and all those restrictions, but it's also the processes and procedures that you have to go through, which is
taking longer,
a lot longer. And as you said, you mentioned there, it's obviously, it wanes on you and it's stressful. I suppose like the rest of us, you're a brother, you're a father, you're an uncle, you're a cousin. It has to play on your mind and your morale, all this kind of stuff. And I suppose, what impact would it have on you in terms of your mental health, your physical health? Obviously, you're working 12, 13-hour shifts. There's a degree of, trying to get some food into you to keep your energy levels up, trying to, sleep correctly. This all plays into. How have you managed that over the last 10 months?
Yeah, it is. It is different. Everyone is different. Like, it's sometimes, like, your work colleagues are important because you need that gallows humor in the team. People don't understand that they're in this type of job. To realize, people say, well, someone's there in a cardiac arrest and he's a smile on his face because someone said something to you. It's just you need that. People don't realize until you're in that situation. That's how you thrive. If you're dealing on a day where you've had a couple of cardiac arrests, they haven't passed away, it hits them, especially if it's someone young. You're then dealing with the family, seeing upset from them. I suppose in COVID it's even more difficult because the family can come in, so they're not seeing their loved ones. That's very, very difficult on them. It is, as the morale is very hard then, like, because obviously last year we had, before we know what's going on, people redeployed. The way the emergency, the flow of emergency was completely changed to suit COVID. Then sort of over the time as COVID sort of went off or in and lockdown, sort of trying to go back to some sort of normality in the way around. And then obviously the second wave, and now it just seems your morale gets hit because HSE is very slow in reacting to this. You get the government, then you look at the government sometimes thinking, oh, what are you actually doing to help us in this situation? Lockdowns, personally myself, I don't think they work, because this is what happens. You come out of lockdown, there's massive at Christmas influx of people, and with COVID, and now obviously we're back in lockdown and everyone's lives disrupted. It's a difficult one. Morale does play. It is hard when you're there every day. Like yesterday, I was in a very busy area, and their biggest issue was isolation beds, because a lot of people coming in COVID. So you're sort of moving patients around. Patients aren't flowing through the ward because there's a high number of patients with COVID on the ward. So ED gets backed up, and then it's almost like you're fighting, swimming against the tide a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it's a tidal wave. It's coming at you, not just a little wave in Donegal Beach.
It's not. No, you wouldn't be surfing on it, In terms of switching off, Derek, what do you do? As you said, you're in isolation, so you're dealing with all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you have to bring it home, and you're in isolation. You're trying to you have your own thoughts to deal with. Do you switch off? How do you switch off? Do you go for a run? Do you paint? Do you watch something on Netflix? What do you do?
Yeah, that's like that. Even pre sort of COVID, that was always something like that. Depending on what shift. Sometimes you come home. For me, it used to just you get home after turning their shift, especially when recess was busy. A lot of time was just, for me, it's just come home and you almost need an hour or two just to sit down and just
decompress,
just relax and let the body. Yeah, exactly. For me, it's like that. Jogging, I do a bit of jogging, run a couple of marathons, so sort of jogging will be a thing to sort of clear the mind. Watching TV, watching your sort of programs, things like that. It's just it varies, like that. But it is important. But what the opposing thing you have to do is, and I've had this with younger nurses as well, you have to sort of have it's hard to say unless you're in a situation, but you have to sort of always be cold and just think, right, move on.
Yeah.
Like that patient, I've sorted that patient out, but you have to move on because someone else needs you, and you can't let this job get on top of you, because it will destroy you. Because you do, especially in ED, in a busy ED, you do see a lot. It is consistent pressure. Even pre-COVID, was with trolley watch and trolley counting, no beds in the wards. It is a massive stressful job to be in any department now, especially with COVID.
Absolutely.
So
it's
switching off is important.
It's just finding that niche that works for you, because as you said, everybody's different. You do the running. You've done the marathons, the 1% club, hands up, I'm there as well, just about. But hopefully get there again, fingers crossed, into the future. But you have to. You're not working in isolation. You've seen what's gone through the last 10 months. There's been good decisions. There's been bad decisions. There's been, we were at the start where we didn't have enough PPE for everybody. We finally got the Aer Lingus flights coming in. The government did some good work on that. The HSE also did a bit of good work. But I'm sure there's a lot of frustration with different parts of the community, with different parts of your role, people in your role, in terms of what you've seen being done, and what frustrations are there still within the nursing, within the hospital, from yourself, in terms of what you've seen going on?
Yeah, it's like I said there, so I'm not a big fan of lockdowns. I think there's better ways to go about it. But regardless whether I'm a fan of it or not, if this is what the government's route is going down, I will follow it, because I can see why. I see the rationale why they're doing it, why they see it work, and obviously it does work. I just don't think it works long term.
Yeah.
I suppose for the public out there, it's as in people are just. I think part of it is fatigue, COVID fatigue, because we've been in now lockdowns. Like I was talking to one of the girls, a friend of hers had a sort of runny nose and a bit of a cough, and still went to a house party, and now everyone's come back positive in that house party. So it's using common sense. It is tough, but we're doing it for a reason. And like sometimes, I suppose the frustrated nurse is me having I've given the opportunity to rant now, so that was a bad mistake.
Use it. It's a platform for you.
People ask me, because I'm a senior nurse now, so I'm one of the managers. So I work sort of triage research a lot. People are asking sort of, in my own colleagues who don't work in triage, what's sort of coming in. And what you're seeing a lot is it's three different categories. You have the nursing home, so one of their residents picks up COVID, and what they do then is any excuse to get them into the hospital, or they're having temperatures, having this, because they just want to lessen it in there because they're coming in. You're getting sort of a mix of people underlying conditions, obviously, who pick up COVID, and they're the ones you're really worried about because some of them have underlying respiratory conditions. You're getting then the young people, like ourselves, very young like ourselves,
very good,
who are diagnosed with COVID, and they're coming into you in triage, almost better than myself, and you're like, what's brought you in? Oh, I've COVID the last 3 days or last week, I'm just feeling a bit worse. And it's like, and you do the labs, they're all fine, and you're thinking, yeah, you have COVID, we know what it is, it's tough it out. And then you do get the young people coming in, and their oxygen levels are a bit lower. Even though they're young and fit, they're obviously getting a bad dose of COVID, and they're the ones who need to be there.
Absolutely.
So I suppose pre-COVID and post-COVID, acopia is a big thing as well that puts pressure on the emergency departments. People just not able to cope. Like when I was younger, probably same as yourself, unless your arm was hanging off,
you weren't going anywhere.
To the emergency department or hospital.
No.
I
think there was even one stage where my brother had a broken elbow, and my mum said that'd be fine. We eventually got her, convinced her to get him to the hospital, and true enough, 2 X-rays.
Last week, was it?
2 X-rays later, he had a fractured elbow. But that's kind of the caliber of people that we were probably brought up coming from Coolock, and a little bit tougher maybe than most. One other thing, I suppose, one of the things that the public were very positive at the very start of COVID, and you've touched on it yourself, the COVID fatigue. We were out, clapping you on our balconies and our doors. We were sending money to the GoFundMe pages for all the food that people were getting in. But, would you say that the 2 fingers were kind of put up to everybody over the Christmas that said, basically, you know what, I don't care what's going to come in January, we're going to have our Christmas. Do you think it was a bit of a 2 fingers to everybody in the hospitals?
I can't see other nurses. Personally, myself, until you mentioned it, I didn't see it sort of that way. I can understand like that. There is people coming into ED before COVID that don't need to be there. And it's just stay at home and you'll be fine. But I know with COVID, a lot of people, it's a fear for a lot of people because they've seen what's going on. We know the second wave has come now, and it seems to be worse than it was at the start, especially down in Limerick. So you can understand people coming in. I fully understand. As I said, I don't know what the government, personally don't know what the government were thinking, putting us in such a lock. They should have either kept the lockdown over Christmas, but I fully understand people wanting to go see their family, wanting to spend time with the family, haven't seen for months. It's Christmas, it's a special time of the year. They knew more than likely, I think everyone knew we were going back into lockdown after Christmas. And the government sort of made that clear, and I think that was my error on their part, because then people thought, well, sod it, I don't care, I have a sniffle, but I want to see my family, I want to go out for Christmas, I want to go home for Christmas. So don't see it as 2 fingers salute, but I just think there could be more education around it, more of a media campaign. Like I've often said that even with nursing in the healthcare over here, HSE can do so much more. Like I remember in England, there's billboard campaigns where you have a line of people, and at the end there's a wreath, and basically over the side of the NHS, but over each person should have gone to the doctor, should have stayed at home, gone to the GP, and the last person, RP, should have been in the emergency department. So there needs to be more education. Plus, that's another podcast for another day, because that's a multifaceted problem there. Will take another half an hour to
probably so, Derek. I suppose signing off on this, would you have any message to the listeners out there that are, they're obviously conscious of trying to keep well, but what they can do themselves, just make sure they keep themselves safe and keep those around them safe?
The most important message is stay in your bubble. Just stay in your bubble, regardless how hard it is. Stay in your bubble, because we need to think long term. So we have to think long term. So short term pain for long term gain, as the saying goes. Regardless of your belief or not, stick with the mask wearing. wash the hands, and wash the hands again, and just reduce your socialization. So stay in your bubble, nose in your bubble, and stay with that bubble. And just as soon as you have any symptoms, just isolate yourself away, even if it's just a blocked nose, runny nose, and get the test done. And whether you believe them or not, I would say get the vaccine.
Absolutely, get the vaccine.
We don't know enough about it at the moment, but it's silly to say no, not getting away, in my opinion. I think we should get the vaccine, and then like that, if it ends up being like the flu jab every year, then you can make a more educated guess. But at the moment, I think it's too risky. Too many people are dying, and people are dying from this.
That's it. That's it from the horse's mouth. That is really good advice. And in terms of the vaccine, I have to totally agree. You know, if it's a case of we get it into us, see what happens. If you have to get it every year, then we can make them decisions in the years. But at the moment, with the amount of people dying, it's definitely something that we need to be rolling out quicker than we are. But we will get there, and that's the positive thing about it. In terms of myself, Derek, I want to thank you for coming on, but also want to thank you for all the work you've done over the last 10 months in this battle, and you continue to do. All your team there as well in University Limerick, Hospital Limerick, and all your colleagues across the island of Ireland. The work you've done is incredible. We hope that we're on the downward trend now with the cases. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks to 3 weeks we will see less people presenting, less cases being confirmed, and make your life a little bit easier than it is at the moment.
Yeah. Look, thanks very much, Pierce. Enjoyed the conversation. I hope it was okay for your listeners.
Thank you very much.